All right, let's do this. You ready to dive deep into FlutterFlow's 2024? It's going to be a wild ride. They shipped so much stuff.
Yeah, it was a pretty year. Every month it felt like there was a new wave of features.
Exactly. We're going to break it all down month by month, so buckle up. Starting with January, right out of the gate, FlutterFlow dropped Squiat for offline data storage. Huge, right?
Yeah, game changer for a lot of apps. Suddenly you could build things like inventory trackers, field data collection tools, even offline games.
Exactly. It's like they were saying, hey, go build for the whole world, even the parts without perfect internet.
Totally. And to make things even smoother for devs, they added the ability to use API results directly as data types. No more messing around with JSON paths.
Oh, I remember those days. What a time saver.
Dear egg.
And fewer errors, too, I bet.
Definitely. They really focused on developer pain points this year.
Yeah, it shows. They also added super-based Google authentication in January, making user logins easier.
Always a good move. Simplify, simplify.
Plus, they threw in some visual flair with new animation effects. Shimmer, tint, and flip. That flip one, especially I could see that being super useful.
Oh yeah, tons of potential for transitions and reveals. Now, February, things got really interesting. Callback actions with parameters landed.
And that was a big deal for component reusability.
Huge GE. Imagine you're building an e-commerce app with product cards everywhere. Before, you might have needed separate components for like add to cart versus view details actions. But now, with callback actions and parameters, you could make one super versatile product card component and just tweak its behavior using those parameters.
So much less repetitive work. I love it.
Right. Work smarter, not harder.
Right.
And another workhorse widget got a big upgrade that month. Data table.
Oh, yeah, the community had been asking for this one for ages. Sorting, selection, pagination, they packed it all in.
All the things data-heavy apps needed. They also finally added search to the color picker. Small change, big impact.
No more endlessly scrolling for that perfect shade of blue. And for the power users out there, they added the ability to export projects as Flutter modules via the CLI.
Opening up all sorts of possibilities for integration with other Flutter projects. They really catered to everyone this year, from beginners to pros.
And they teased FlutterFlow for Windows as coming soon. Windows users rejoice. Then came March, which kicked off with a bang. Local run for macOS launched.
That was a game changer. Instant testing on a device. Huge boost to developer speed.
No more waiting for builds, just see your changes in real time. Love it.
Right. And then they dropped something that really pushed the boundaries, Gemini AI actions integrated into FlutterFlow.
Suddenly, we could build apps that generate text, understand images, all sorts of AI magic. It felt like the future had arrived.
It was a big signal that AI was becoming a key part of app development. And FlutterFlow wasn't just keeping up, they were pushing the envelope.
And they didn't stop there. March also saw the arrival of an in-app walkthrough builder. No more struggling to create those onboarding flows.
Makes it so much easier to give users that smooth introduction to your app. First impressions matter.
Absolutely. They also, of course, snuck in a Flutter upgrade to 3.12. Got to stay up to date.
Always important. But the real cliffhanger of March was that FlutterFlow for Windows was still coming soon, along with something cryptic called FlutterFlow Copilot.
Ooh, mysterious. It felt like they were hinting at some next-level AI assistance coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, and Windows users were still waiting patiently, or maybe not so patiently, but the wait finally ended on March 21st.
FlutterFlow for Windows officially launched. Windows users, your time had come.
And it wasn't just platform parity. The Windows app was built to take advantage of native performance capabilities, so it actually ran smoother and more responsively than some folks expected.
Nice. They even added Google Sign-In for the Windows app right away. No half measures here. But March still wasn't over. They also introduced parallel actions.
Yes, letting you execute multiple things at once. Huge for app performance and responsiveness.
Like having a team of tiny developers working in parallel, getting stuff done. No more bottlenecks.
Exactly. And for even more data handling power, they added Firestore or queries.
Making it possible to build much more complex and flexible data retrieval logic. They really upped their game on the database side of things this year.
Definitely. And for the code-savvy folks, they added API interceptors. Now you could intercept and modify API requests and responses, giving you tons of control over those interactions.
I can see that being super useful for things like authentication, logging, or even modifying data on the fly. It's like having a personal assistant for your APIs.
Right. Now on to April, where things kicked off with a splash. Drag-and-drop widgets arrived.
This was a big step toward making FlutterFlow even more intuitive, right? Imagine being able to build features like list reordering or game mechanics just by dragging and dropping.
It was like they took what was already visually driven and made it even more visual.
Wow.
Huge for accessibility.
And to keep the momentum going, they added local run IDE configuration. So now you could choose your preferred IDE for local run, customizing that workflow even further.
Because for some devs, IDE choice is a matter of life or death, right?
You know it. And then there was the UI builder value field. Seemingly small, but actually super impactful.
Oh yeah, this let you rename variables to be more readable. It's all about code clarity, especially when you're working on bigger projects.
Or when you're collaborating with a team. Clean code is happy code. But April wasn't done yet. Part 2 of their April releases brought us custom image map markers. Finally, our maps could have some personality.
Right. No more boring default markers. Now you could use any image you wanted to represent locations on your map. Made them so much more engaging.
And to make API work even faster, they added the ability to generate data types directly from JSON responses.
You have huge time savers, especially when you're working with APIs that have complex data structures. Click, click, done.
But even with all these incredible updates, there were still some features that remained on the coming soon list, tantalizingly out of reach.
Ah, yes, the features that got away, the ones that kept us guessing.
Like the rich text editor and animations by variable. Those popped up repeatedly on the roadmap, but never quite made it to primetime in 2024.
It makes you wonder what happened behind the scenes. Maybe they ran into technical challenges, or maybe they just decided to prioritize other things.
Or maybe they're cooking up something even more ambitious for those features that we haven't even imagined yet.
Who knows? But it definitely keeps things interesting. It's like FlutterFlow is always keeping us on our toes.
Speaking of keeping things interesting, April Part 2, again, snuck in even more updates. Adaptive icons for Android arrived, along with notification count badge actions.
Keeping those app icons looking sharp. And the color picker got a redesign, making it even smoother to use.
They also added Apple Privacy Manifest support, essential for App Store compliance these days.
Definitely. And the safe area property for containers arrived, making sure content didn't get hidden by things like notches or rounded corners.
It's like they were constantly refining and polishing the platform, making sure everything was pixel perfect. Then came May, bringing a mix of visual goodies and long-awaited animation features.
Kicking things off with the custom canvas color option. Now you could preview how your components looked against different backgrounds, super helpful for transparency and stuff.
Like a virtual lightbox for your UI elements. And then, the moment we'd all been waiting for, animation values could finally be set by variable.
That was huge GE. It unlocked a whole new level of animation possibilities. Suddenly, you could create animations that responded to user input, data changes, all sorts of dynamic stuff.
I could see that being used for some really creative and engaging effects. And they rounded out May with the ability to update branch names after creation, a small but welcome quality of life improvement.
Right, it's those little touches that show they're paying attention to the details. Now, May Part 2 was all about making things dynamic. Gradient colors and pie chart colors could now be driven by variables.
Imagine a pie chart where the colors change based on the data. Way more engaging than static colors.
Definitely. And for teams working together, they introduced the config diff view, making it much easier to resolve merge conflicts.
Merge conflicts, the bane of every developer's existence. Anything that makes that process less painful is a win in my book.
Absolutely. And finally, for May, they exposed the FlutterFlow managed Flutter binary. This ensured everyone was using the same Flutter version for editing and running their code, reducing compatibility issues.
Consistency is key. It's like making sure everyone's speaking the same language. June brought some powerful tools for debugging AD, a feature that had developers rethinking what was possible with Nocode. Recursive components.
First, the debug panel. This was huge for finding and fixing bugs. You can now see real-time variable values, making it much easier to track down the source of a problem.
It's like having X-ray vision into your app, seeing all the inner workings. And then came recursive components.
I know.
Right, a component that can embed itself, essentially creating a loop.
Yeah, it was a bit tricky at first, but it opened up some incredibly powerful possibilities for building complex nested structures. Things like comment threads, folder hierarchies, anything that needed that kind of self-repeating pattern.
It was a real testament to how FlutterFlow is pushing the boundaries of what's possible with no code. Alongside those headliners, June also saw improvements to code magic deploy output, making it clearer when something went wrong.
Always helpful. And they added the ability to set the cursor position in form fields. Might seem minor, but it's those little touches that can make a big difference for user experience.
It's all about those small details, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we've reached the halfway point of our FlutterFlow 2024 journey,
Yeah.
but the innovation didn't stop there.
Oh no, they were just getting warmed up. June Part 2 brought us implicitly animated text styles, making it super easy to add animations to your text.
And they upgraded to Flutter 3.2 2.2, keeping pace with the latest advancements. Got to stay on the cutting edge.
Of course. Though with any Flutter upgrade, there's always a chance of breaking changes for custom code, so developers, be prepared to do a little tweaking and testing after an upgrade.
Good advice. July was all about real-time updates, smoother visuals, and making those draggable widgets even more versatile.
Right. One of the most requested features finally arrived: streaming API support. This was a game changer for apps that rely on live data, like chat apps, stock tickers, or anything that needs real-time updates.
No more refreshing the page every few seconds. And remember the debug panel. It got even better in July, with support for local run.
So now you could see real-time variable values even when you were testing on your own device. Made debugging so much more powerful.
Yeah, no more guessing games. They also added shadows to the text widget. Might seem like a small aesthetic change, but actually improved readability quite a bit.
Shadows can really make text pop, especially if it's over a busy background. It's a subtle but effective way to enhance the user experience. And to give developers even more control over drag and drop, they exposed more properties for the draggable widget.
Allowing for all sorts of custom interactions and behaviors. They really thought of everything. July Part 2 focused on collaboration, accessibility, and refining existing features. Page and component descriptions arrived.
Ah, yes, finally, a way to document your work and make it easier for others to understand what's going on. Huge for teamwork.
It's like leaving little notes for your future self, or for anyone else who might need to work with your project.
Exactly. And they added the ability to control the minimum version for iOS and Mine SDK for Android, important for using certain packages and ensuring compatibility.
And for those who like to keep things tidy, they finally added the ability to sort lists in descending order. It's the little things that count sometimes.
They also made the debug panel available outside of FlutterFlow via the CLI, so now you could access that debugging power from your terminal.
Gives developers more flexibility and control. August brought us more of those small but mighty improvements that streamlined workflows and made development even smoother.
Yeah, like the ability to preview padding, border radius, and responsive size width values directly in the builder. No more guessing games. You could see exactly how your layout was going to look.
It's all about making the design process more intuitive and visual. They also made it possible to rename custom data types in enums. No more manual refactoring.
Huge time saver, especially when you're working on larger projects. And they added the option to toggle debug mode off for local run and test mode. Smart move, because the debug panel, while awesome, could sometimes impact performance.
So this gave developers the control to switch it off when they needed to get a true sense of their app's speed. And to make merge conflicts even less painful, they improved merge conflict handling by considering the entire branch history.
A subtle but important change, especially for teams working with complex branching strategies. It helped ensure that merges were accurate and predictable. But even with all these improvements, branching was still a bit of a sore spot for some users.
Yeah, branching can be a tricky beast. And while FlutterFlow made progress in making it more user-friendly, it was clear that there was still work to be done.
But hey, at least they acknowledged the issue and were actively working on it. And then, boom, September arrived. And with it, FlutterFlow 5.0.
It felt like a culmination of all their hard work throughout the year. This was a major leap forward, with a whole slew of game-changing features.
Development environments, for one. This was a massive addition, allowing you to manage separate setups for development, staging, and production. No more accidentally breaking your live app with the test change.
And then there were the gesture detector action triggers, over 50 new ones. Suddenly, we could trigger actions based on all sorts of user gestures. Swipes, drags, pinches, long presses, you name it.
Made apps so much more interactive and engaging, you could really get creative with those gestures. And for web app developers, they finally added keyboard shortcut support.
Essential for web apps. Makes everything so much more efficient. And to make components even more flexible, they introduced Widget Builder as parameter.
Yeah, that was a powerful one. It basically allowed you to pass an entire widget tree as a parameter to a component. So you could create these super versatile components that could be customized in all sorts of ways.
And then came the bombshell, libraries. This was huge GE. Now developers could create and share reusable components, APIs, code snippets, and more, all with version control.
It was a game changer for both individual developers and teams. Suddenly, we had this whole ecosystem of building blocks that we could use to assemble apps more efficiently.
It felt like they were building a movement, a community around no-code development, and the FlutterFlow marketplace was born.
Exactly. It's like the App Store for FlutterFlow components. And the fact that you can potentially monetize your libraries is incredible. It opens up so many possibilities.
October was a month of richer interactions, deeper integrations, and the first hints of AI magic making its way deeper into the platform.
Starting with the ability to include rich content in tooltips. No more plain text tooltips. Now you could add images, icons, buttons, even formatted text, made them so much more useful and engaging.
And they expanded development environment support to include Supabase, allowing you to have separate dev staging production setups for your databases.
So you could have a test database for development, a staging database for testing, and then your live database for production. Kept everything nice and organized.
And to make collaboration even smoother, they added the ability to switch environments and add values outside the main branch. It's all about making teamwork easier and more efficient. And to make animations even smoother and more effortless, they introduced implicitly animated opacity.
Yeah, a nice little touch that added some visual polish. But the real excitement of October came towards the end of the month. First, they dropped the FlutterFlow Visual Studio Code extension, a huge win for developers who wanted to use a full-fledged IDE for their custom code.
Visual Studio Code is a beast. It's got all sorts of advanced features for editing, debugging, and managing larger code bases. This was a big step towards bridging the gap between no-code and pro-code development.
Agreed. And then, in a move that hinted at the future of FlutterFlow, they announced FlutterFlow AI tooling. This was a suite of AI-powered features designed to assist developers and push the boundaries of what was possible with no code.
We got Page Autocomplete, which could intelligently add widgets to a page based on its context. We got Sketch to Component, which let you turn a rough sketch into a working component. And we got Enhanced Page and Component Generation, which used AI to generate more visually appealing and functional stuff from simple prompts.
It was a glimpse into a future where AI could play a much more active role in the app development process. Super exciting stuff.
October Part 2 brought us a mix of new features and refinements, including the long-awaited Flex widget. This gave developers a more flexible and powerful way to arrange elements on the screen, perfect for building responsive designs.
They also added trailing icons for buttons, a small but welcome addition for visual consistency. And for those working with environments, they added an environment tag to the CLI, making it easier to pull code for specific environments.
They also introduced library values, allowing library creators to let users customize certain values, like API keys or database URLs, without having to modify the library code directly. Made libraries even more versatile.
And to pave the way for the new and improved library system, they deprecated team libraries. It was like they were cleaning house, making way for the future of component reusability in FlutterFlow.
November was a month of Supabase upgrades, real-time data, streamlined workflows, and a big push towards migrating everyone to the new library system.
Kicking things off with a Supabase package upgrade to version 2.6.0, this brought a lot of new features and improvements, but also some breaking changes. So developers, be sure to check the migration guide if you're working with Supabase.
Always good advice. Along with the upgrade, they also introduced Supabase streaming queries. This allowed developers to receive real-time updates from their Supabase databases. Perfect for building dynamic, responsive apps.
Yeah, like live chat, real-time dashboards, collaborative editing, and more. Data could now flow seamlessly into the app without the need for manual refreshing. A huge step forward for Supabase integration.
And to expand the authentication options, they added Apple authentication for Supabase.
Yeah.
Got to keep those Apple users happy.
Absolutely. And to make things easier to find, they added a search bar to the app settings page. Small change, big impact. No more hunting around for that one obscure setting.
They also overhauled the dependency page, making it much easier to manage external libraries and packages. You could now add custom pub dependencies, view and adjust existing ones, and get better error messages to prevent conflicts.
Much needed. Managing dependencies can be a real pain, so any improvements there are always welcome.
And to encourage everyone to move to the new library system, they added a team library migration tool. It's like they were holding our hands through the transition, making it as smooth as possible.
Always appreciate that. November Part 2 brought a few more goodies, focusing on file handling, password management, and expanding the capabilities of draggable widgets.
First up, they added the download files from Firebase storage action, made it much easier to work with files stored in Firebase. No more jumping through hoops to retrieve your files.
They also made some updates to the reset password flow for both Firebase and Supabase, giving developers more flexibility and control over how password resets work. Password management is important, so these updates were definitely welcome.
And for those who love draggable widgets, they added on-drag started and on-drag cancel triggers. Now you could create even more complex and interactive drag-and-drop experiences. Just imagine the possibilities.
It's like they were constantly giving us more tools and more power to build amazing things with FlutterFlow.
Exactly. December arrived, bringing with it a sense of excitement for the new year and a final push to deliver some highly anticipated features before the year's end.
Starting strong with environment-specific deployment settings. Now you could customize deployment settings for different environments, development, staging, production, whatever you needed. No more manually changing settings every time you deploy to a different environment.
It's like they were taking care of all the tedious stuff for us, letting us focus on what really matters, building awesome apps. And then, the news that had the FlutterFlow community buzzing. They opened up the marketplace for library submissions.
This was huge. Now, developers could not only share their amazing components and integrations, but they could potentially monetize them too. It was like they were creating a whole new economy around no-code development.
And to support all those library creators, they rolled out several updates to the Visual Studio Code extension. A new panel, Flutter version management support, improved stability. They even open-sourced the extensions code.
Open sourcing it was a bold move, showing their commitment to transparency and collaboration. It meant anyone could contribute to the development of the extension, making it even more powerful and tailored to the needs of FlutterFlow developers.
And for those working with Supabase, they added like filter support. Now you could easily search for data using wildcard patterns. Really helpful for anyone working with large data sets. No more scrolling through endless records.
Right, it's like having a much more powerful search bar within your app. They also made the on-data change trigger work for streaming queries in Supabase. So now you could trigger actions in your app based on real-time changes in your database. Super powerful for building dynamic and interactive experiences.
It brought Supabase more in line with Firebase in terms of real-time capabilities. They also added a custom redirect URL for the Supabase reset password flow, giving developers more control over where users ended up after they reset their password.
So you could redirect them to a specific page in your app or even to an external website if needed. Really handy for creating a seamless and customized user experience.
And to give developers more control over user permissions, they added the ability to customize when that permission notification for push notifications appeared. It's a small detail, but it shows that they were thinking about those little things that can make a big difference for user experience.
Absolutely. Instead of bombarding users with permission requests right away, you could now wait until it made more sense contextually. Much more user-friendly.
December Part 2 brought a few more surprises before the year came to a close. First up, support for iOS unlisted app distribution. This was a big win for developers who wanted to beta test their apps or share them with a select group of people without going through the full App Store review process.
Perfect for getting early feedback or showing off your app to potential investors without making it publicly available. They also added the ability to control the swipe direction for swipeable stacks.
A nice touch for anyone building card-based interfaces. Now you could have users swipe left, right, up, down, whatever direction made sense for your app. And as a final gift for the year, they added support for Supabase OR filters. Now you could create complex queries that retrieve data based on multiple criteria.
Like, find all products that are either on sale or are in stock. Much more flexible and powerful querying capabilities.
It was clear that they were committed to constantly improving the platform, giving developers more and more power to build sophisticated and amazing apps. And with that, the curtain closed on FlutterFlow's incredible 2024 journey.
It was a year of remarkable progress, wasn't it? They just kept shipping feature after feature, pushing the boundaries of what was possible with no-code development.
What impressed me the most was their dedication to listening to the community and responding to their needs. They seem to have a knack for identifying pain points and delivering solutions that made developers' lives easier and more enjoyable.
I agree. It felt like they were on a mission to democratize app development, empowering anyone with an idea to bring it to life, regardless of their coding experience.
And as we look ahead to 2025 and beyond, it's exciting to imagine what they have in store for us. Will we see even more AI-powered features? Will they continue to push the boundaries of visual development? Will they introduce new ways to collaborate and share code?
Who knows? But one thing's for sure, the future of FlutterFlow looks incredibly bright. They've got a passionate community, a talented team, and a clear vision for the future of no-code development.
I can't wait to see what they come up with next. But before we dive into all that, let's take a moment to reflect on some of the key themes that emerged from this whirlwind of updates.
Yeah, let's unpack all that awesomeness. What stood out to you?
Well, it's clear that FlutterFlow was laser-focused on improving the developer experience in 2024. They introduced a whole range of features designed to make development faster, smoother, and more enjoyable.
From the debug panel to local run, from keyboard shortcuts to improved dependency management, they really tackled those developer pain points head on. It's clear they were listening to the feedback and trying to make FlutterFlow as developer-friendly as possible.
And then there was the huge emphasis on component reusability. They were all about empowering developers to build modular and reusable components, making it easier to create complex apps and maintain a clean and organized code base.
Features like callback actions with parameters, widget builder as parameter, and the introduction of libraries were all about promoting that component reusability. Write less code, build apps faster. That was the mantra.
And of course, we can't forget about the debut of AI tooling. While still in its early stages, the introduction of AI-powered features like page autocomplete, sketch-to-component, and enhanced page and component generation hinted at a future where AI could play a much bigger role in the app development process.
It felt like they were just scratching the surface of what AI could do. I'm really curious to see how they continue to integrate AI into the platform in the years to come.
Me too. It feels like they're on the verge of something really transformative. But beyond the individual features, what really struck me was the overall sense of maturity and stability that FlutterFlow demonstrated in 2024. It felt like they were transitioning from a promising startup to a robust and reliable platform, capable of handling complex projects and empowering developers to build production-ready apps.
I completely agree. It felt like they struck a really good balance between innovation and stability, introducing new features while also ensuring that the core platform was solid and dependable.
It gives you confidence, knowing that you can rely on the platform to build real-world apps that people will actually use. Okay, now for the fun part. Let's talk about what we didn't see in 2024. Remember those features that kept popping up on the roadmaps but never quite materialized?
Ah, yes, the features that got away, the ones that left us wanting more. Which ones stood out to you?
Well, the rich text editor was one I was personally hoping for. It seemed like such a natural addition, giving developers more control over text formatting and allowing them to create richer and more engaging content within their apps.
I was looking forward to that one too. It would be so useful for things like blog posts, articles, or any kind of content-heavy app. I wonder what happened there. Maybe they ran into some unexpected technical challenges, or maybe they just decided to prioritize other things. It's hard to say for sure.
And then there was animations by variable, which also seemed to be on the roadmap for a while but never materialized. It was supposed to give developers even more control over animations, letting them trigger them based on variable values. I remember seeing that on the roadmap and thinking, wow, that's going to open up some really creative possibilities.
But it seems like it's still on the back burner for now. Maybe they're saving it for a future update when they can implement it in a more comprehensive and robust way.
Yeah, perhaps they realized it was a bigger undertaking than they initially thought. Or maybe they're cooking up something even more ambitious that we haven't even imagined yet.
It's always fun to speculate. But even without those features, 2024 was still a phenomenal year for FlutterFlow. It makes you wonder what could possibly be in store for 2025, right?
If their track record is anything to go by, I think we can expect even more innovation and exciting new features. And who knows, maybe those elusive features will finally make their debut in 2025. Maybe they're saving the best for last.
Fingers crossed. But before we get too carried away with future predictions, I'm curious to get your thoughts on how FlutterFlow stacks up against other no-code platforms out there. There are certainly a lot of great options these days, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, but what do you think sets FlutterFlow apart?
For me, it's the combination of power and ease of use. You can build really complex apps visually without writing much code at all. But if you need to dive deeper and add custom logic or integrate with external services, you have that flexibility too. It's the best of both worlds.
Exactly. It's not just a toy for building simple prototypes. You can build production-ready apps with FlutterFlow, and that's a big differentiator. Plus, the fact that it's built on top of Flutter means your apps are going to be performant and look native on both iOS and Android.
That's huge. No need to learn separate languages or frameworks for each platform. And of course, we have to mention the community. FlutterFlow has fostered this incredible, supportive, and collaborative community, which is a huge asset for anyone learning the platform or looking for help with specific challenges.
It really feels like you're part of something bigger when you're using FlutterFlow. You're not just a user, you're part of a movement, a community of people who are passionate about the potential of no-code development.
One thing I find particularly interesting about FlutterFlow is that it doesn't seem to alienate experienced developers. A lot of no-code platforms are very clearly marketed toward complete beginners, which is great. But FlutterFlow seems to have struck a balance where experienced developers can also see the value in using it.
It's like they've created a tool that can accelerate development for everyone, regardless of their skill level. I think that's a really smart approach. It speaks to the power and flexibility of the platform.
It's not just a stepping stone into coding, it's a legitimate tool that can be used to build professional-grade apps. And that's really exciting to me. It feels like FlutterFlow is breaking down those barriers between no-code and pro-code, creating a space where everyone can come together and build amazing things.
Absolutely. And that's what makes me so optimistic about the future of FlutterFlow. They're building something truly special, something that has the potential to change the way we think about app development.
All right, I think it's time to shift gears and dive into part 2 of this FlutterFlow epic.
Let's do it. There's still so much more to cover.
Buckle up, listeners. It's about to get even more exciting.
I can't wait. And speaking of building, FlutterFlow didn't slow down as we entered the final stretch of the year. December was all about deployment flexibility, community contributions, and some seriously powerful data handling features.
Yeah, they definitely saved some of the best for last.
Right off the bat, they gave us environment-specific deployment settings. You can now customize those settings for both your mobile and web apps based on the environment, dev, staging, production, you name it.
So much easier to manage different versions of your app with different API keys, database connections, or even entirely different backend setups.
Yeah, no more manually tweaking things every time you switched environments. It's a huge time saver and reduces the risk of errors.
And remember how we talked about libraries being a game changer? Well, December saw the FlutterFlow marketplace open up for library submissions.
Huge GE milestone. Now, developers could not only share those awesome components and integrations they built, but they could actually potentially make money from them too.
It's like the FlutterFlow App Store, right?
Yeah.
Full of pre-built functionality just waiting to be plugged into your project.
Exactly. And to support all the developers creating these libraries, they released several updates to the Visual Studio Code extension, a new panel, Flutter version management support, improved stability. They even open-sourced the extensions code.
Open sourcing it was a smart move. It really shows their commitment to transparency and collaboration, letting the community contribute to the extension's development.
Totally agree. And they didn't forget about all the Supabase users out there either. Like, filter support arrived for Supabase queries, which means you could now do things like search for all users whose names start with a certain letter, or all products with a description that contains a certain keyword.
So much more powerful than just basic equality filters.
Right. Especially useful for those working with large data sets. No more scrolling through hundreds of records to find what you need.
They also made the on-data change trigger compatible with streaming queries in Supabase, which is huge GE for anyone building real-time apps.
You could trigger actions in your app based on those live changes coming from the database, live chat, real-time dashboards, that kind of thing.
Supabase was really catching up to Firebase in terms of real-time features this year.
Yeah, they made some big strides. They also added a custom redirect URL for the Supabase reset password flow. So now you could control where users landed after they reset their password, sending them to a specific page in your app or even an external website.
It's all about those little touches that enhance the user experience.
Exactly, thinking through those flows and making them smooth for the user. And finally, for December, they added the ability to customize when that permission notification for push notifications pops up.
Instead of hitting users with that permission request right when they open the app, you could wait until it made more sense in the context of what they were doing.
A much more user-friendly approach. It's like they were always thinking about how to make those interactions feel more natural.
But December wasn't over yet. They had a few more surprises up their sleeve.
Oh yeah, they squeezed in a couple more big ones before the year ended. Starting with support for iOS unlisted app distribution.
Big win for developers who want to beta test their apps or share them with a limited audience without going through the whole App Store review process.
Exactly. Perfect for getting feedback from early users or showing off your app to potential investors. And then they give us control over the swipe direction for swipeable stacks.
Handy for those who are building card-based interfaces. You could now define which directions users could swipe those cards, Left, right, up, down, whatever worked best for your app.
Adds that extra layer of polish and customization.
Huh.
And as a final gift to round out the year, they added support for Supabase OR filters, making database queries even more powerful.
So now you could search for things like find me all the products that are either on sale or are in stock. Much more flexible than just basic A&D queries.
It really expanded the possibilities for data retrieval. You can get really specific with your queries.
And with that, the curtain closed on FlutterFlow's incredible 2024. It was a truly remarkable year for the platform.
They were on fire the entire year. It felt like every month brought a new wave of innovation and exciting features. It's hard to keep up.
But it's a good problem to have, right? It shows that they're committed to constantly pushing the platform forward and responding to what developers need.
Absolutely. They've built something really special here. It's not just a no-code tool, it's a movement, a community.
It feels like they're changing the way we think about building apps, making it more accessible and empowering anyone to bring their ideas to life.
I completely agree. It's an exciting time to be a part of the FlutterFlow community.
So with all that said, what were your biggest takeaways from FlutterFlow's 2024 journey? What themes or patterns stood out to you?
Well, I think one of the biggest themes was their focus on developer experience. They really went above and beyond to make FlutterFlow as developer-friendly as possible.
Totally agree. It felt like they were constantly thinking about how to streamline workflows, reduce friction, and make development more enjoyable.
From the debug panel to local run, from keyboard shortcuts to improved dependency management, every update seemed to have the developer in mind.
And then there was the emphasis on component reusability, with features like callback actions with parameters, widget builder as parameter, and the introduction of libraries. They were clearly trying to empower developers to build more modular and reusable code, which is essential for creating complex apps and collaborating effectively.
Definitely. Reusable code is happy code, as they say. And of course, we can't forget about the debut of AI tooling. While still in its early stages, the introduction of AI-powered features like page autocomplete and sketch-to-component hinted at a future where AI could play a much bigger role in the app development process.
It felt like they were just scratching the surface of what AI could do. I'm really curious to see how they continue to integrate AI into the platform in the years to come.
Me too. It has the potential to be truly transformative. But beyond the individual features, what really impressed me was the overall sense of maturity and stability that FlutterFlow demonstrated in 2024. It felt like they were transitioning from a promising startup to a robust and reliable platform, capable of handling complex projects and empowering developers to build production-ready apps.
Yeah, it felt like they were hitting their stride, finding that sweet spot between innovation and stability.
Exactly. They were introducing cutting-edge features while also making sure that the core platform was solid and dependable. That's not easy to pull off.
It definitely gives you confidence, knowing that you can rely on FlutterFlow to build real-world apps that people will actually use.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that sets FlutterFlow apart from other no-code platforms. It's not just a toy for building simple prototypes. It's a powerful tool that can be used to build serious professional-grade apps.
Okay, now for the fun part. Let's talk about what we didn't see in 2024. Those features that lingered on the coming soon list but never quite made it to prime time.
The features that got away.
The ones that left us wondering, what happened? Which ones were you most disappointed to not see?
Well, the rich text editor was one I was really hoping for. It seemed like such a natural addition, giving developers more control over text formatting and allowing them to create richer and more engaging content within their apps.
I was with you on that one. It would be so useful for things like blog posts, articles, or any kind of content-heavy app.
It just makes sense, right? I wonder if they ran into some technical challenges or maybe they just decided to prioritize other features.
And then there was animations by variable,
Mm-hmm.
which also seemed to be on the roadmap for a while, but never materialized.
Yes, that one. It would have given developers even more control over animations, letting them trigger them based on variable values. Dynamic, data-driven animations, who wouldn't want that?
It's a mystery why that one didn't make it. Maybe they realized it was a bigger undertaking than they initially thought.
Or maybe they're cooking up something even more ambitious that we haven't even imagined yet.
The suspense is killing me.
Yeah.
But even without those features, 2024 was still a phenomenal year for FlutterFlow. It makes you wonder, what could they possibly do to top it in 2025?
Right. It's almost hard to imagine how they could possibly pack in even more features and improvements.
But knowing FlutterFlow, they'll find a way. They always do. So as we look ahead to the future, What are you most excited about? What are you hoping to see from FlutterFlow in 2025 and beyond?
Well, the AI stuff was definitely a highlight for me. I wouldn't be surprised to see them dive even deeper into AI in 2025. Maybe more sophisticated tools for generating UI layouts, writing code, or even suggesting entire app workflows. AI-powered brainstorming now, that would be something.
Imagine that, just telling FlutterFlow what you want to build and it spits out a fully functional app.
Hmm.
The future is wild.
I know, right? It's crazy to think about. But on a more practical level, I'm also excited to see how they continue to build out their integrations with other tools and services. Imagine being able to connect your FlutterFlow app seamlessly to all sorts of APIs, databases, and cloud platforms. It would make FlutterFlow even more powerful and versatile.
Yeah, it's all about breaking down those silos and making it easier to build apps that connect to the wider world. I think we'll also see them continue to invest in making FlutterFlow more accessible to a wider range of users. They've already done a great job of making it easy for beginners to get started, but I think there's still room for improvement.
I agree. Maybe more interactive tutorials, better documentation, or even some kind of built-in mentorship program where experienced FlutterFlow developers could help guide beginners.
That's a great idea. It would really foster that sense of community and make learning FlutterFlow even more fun and engaging.
Yeah, I love that.
And of course, I'm hoping to see those elusive features finally make their debut. Rich text editor, animations by variable. I'm looking at you.
Fingers crossed. But even if they don't materialize, I'm confident that FlutterFlow will continue to surprise and delight us with innovative new features and improvement.
Me too. They haven't let us down yet.
Okay, before we get too carried away with all this excitement, let's step back for a moment and compare FlutterFlow to some of the other no-code platforms out there. There are certainly a lot of great options these days, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. But what do you think sets FlutterFlow apart?
Hmm, that's a good question. There are a lot of factors to consider, but for me, it comes down to a few key things. First, the combination of power and ease of use. You can build really complex apps visually without writing much code at all. But if you need to dive deeper and add custom logic or integrate with external services, you have that flexibility too. It's the best of both worlds.
I completely agree. It's not just a toy for building simple prototypes. You can build production-ready apps with FlutterFlow, and that's a big differentiator. And the fact that it's built on top of Flutter means your apps are going to be performant and look native on both iOS and Android. That's a huge advantage.
Absolutely. And the Flutter community is massive and growing rapidly, so there's a ton of support and resources available if you ever get stuck.
Yeah, you're never really on your own when you're building with FlutterFlow. And then there's the community. FlutterFlow has cultivated this incredibly supportive and collaborative community, which is a huge asset for anyone learning the platform or looking for help with specific challenges.
It's one of the things that makes FlutterFlow so special. It's not just a tool, it's a community, a movement.
And it's a movement that's gaining momentum every day. More and more people are discovering the power of no-code development, and FlutterFlow is leading the charge.
You know, one thing I find particularly interesting about FlutterFlow is that it doesn't seem to alienate experienced developers. A lot of no-code platforms are very clearly marketed towards complete beginners, which is great. But FlutterFlow seems to have struck a balance where experienced developers can also see the value in using it.
Right. It's not just a stepping stone into real coding. It's a legitimate tool that can be used to build professional-grade apps. And even seasoned developers can benefit from the speed and efficiency it offers.
It's like they've created a tool that can accelerate development for everyone, regardless of their skill level.
Exactly. And that's what I find so exciting about FlutterFlow. It's breaking down those barriers between no-code and pro-code, creating a space where everyone can come together and build amazing things.
All right, I think it's time to wrap up this epic deep dive into FlutterFlow's 2024. It's been an incredible journey, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. From major platform updates to subtle refinements, from AI-powered tools to a thriving marketplace, FlutterFlow has shown us what's possible when a company is truly committed to innovation and community.
It's inspiring to see what they've accomplished in such a short amount of time.
And I can't wait to see what they have in store for us in 2025 and beyond. It feels like they're just getting started.
But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought.
Mm-hmm.
What will you create with FlutterFlow?
What app idea have you been dreaming of bringing to life? What problem will you solve? What impact will you make on the world?
Now is the time to turn those dreams into reality. The tools are there, the community is there, and the possibilities are truly limitless. So what are you waiting for? Go build something amazing.
Happy building.
It feels like FlutterFlow really hit their stride in 2024.
They were firing on all cylinders, that's for sure.
It's amazing to see a platform evolve so rapidly, constantly pushing the boundaries and responding to what developers need.
And doing it all while maintaining a really strong sense of community. That's not easy to pull off.
You're right, that community aspect eyes as something special. It feels like everyone's in this together, learning, sharing, and pushing each other to build awesome things.
It's a really positive and supportive environment. And that makes a huge difference when you're learning a new tool or trying to solve a tricky problem.
So, as we wrap up this epic deep dives, I have to ask, what stood out to you the most from FlutterFlow's 2024 journey?
Hmm, that's a tough one. There were so many highlights that I had to pick just one. I'd say it was the introduction of libraries.
I knew you were going to say that. It was a game changer.
Right. Absolutely. It's such a fundamental shift in how we think about building apps with FlutterFlow. Suddenly, we're not just building individual apps. We're building reusable components that can be shared and used across multiple projects. It's a whole new level of efficiency and collaboration.
It feels like they're building an ecosystem, almost like an app store for FlutterFlow components.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can potentially monetize your libraries opens up some really interesting possibilities for developers.
Definitely. It could be a game changer for freelancers, agencies, and anyone who wants to build a business around FlutterFlow development.
And it's only going to get bigger and better, I think. As more developers create and share libraries, the FlutterFlow marketplace will become an even more valuable resource. It's exciting to think about what the future holds.
It really is. It feels like we're just scratching the surface of what's possible with no-code development. And FlutterFlow is leading the charge.
So on that note, I want to thank you for joining me on this deep dive. It's been a blast exploring all the amazing things FlutterFlow accomplished in 2024.
The pleasure was all mine. Always happy to geek out about FlutterFlow.
And to our listeners, thank you for sticking with us through this epic journey. We hope you found it informative and inspiring. We'd love to hear your thoughts too. What features were you most excited about? What are you hoping to see in the future of FlutterFlow? And most importantly, what amazing app will you create with FlutterFlow? The tools are there, the community is there, and the possibilities are limitless. So go out there and build something awesome.
Happy building.